Hi everyone, Mr. Talbot here for you. I'm going to kind of finish out our classical European civilization today. We're going to talk a little bit about the Roman Republic and then getting into the Roman Empire as well. So ancient Rome, again, is one of those, it's super famous thing in history and there's so much you can study on, but we're just really diving into that surface level. So some things I think that are good for you to know. Um, Really Rome's republic is kind of was like the gold standard to the American founding fathers. So people like Alexander Hamilton and James Madison would like look back to Rome's republic and say, okay, they had a really good run of several hundred years before it kind of all fell apart. Did some incredible things. So that the way they set up their government, a lot of it will hopefully feel a little familiar from what you've learned about the U.S. government. We've also got a lot of stuff in common with ancient Greece, which we talked about in our previous video. Um, and a lot of that is just because, the Romans essentially borrowed a huge chunk of classical Greece, and then eventually the Romans are even going to conquer classical Greece. So a lot of the Roman gods have an equivalent Greek god. A lot of the stuff that like Socrates and Plato and Aristotle is going to end up inspiring some of the thinkers of the Roman era. Um, they're also they're well known for kind of their military power as well as the different things that they built, which we're going to see in the next slide. And it all is going to end, and it kind of ends with slowly and then kind of somewhat spectacularly with being conquered by different German tribes and stuff. But once the Republic ends, it's going to be taken over by the Roman Empire. So kind of the more democratic elements of the government are replaced by the more imperial elements of it. One thing I want to emphasize for you though, even in like the democratic system of the Roman Republic, very much so socially stratified. So you got the majority of the population with either slaves or kind of this freedmen group that couldn't have any like political power or anything like that. And then slaves, of course, are owned by somebody else. A lot of times, the slaves of the Roman Republic and later the Empire are people that are conquered and lose, and uh, the prisoners of war. Kind of the most famous group of slaves in the Roman times are going to be the gladiators, who are forced to fight to the death. Um, at the top, and this is kind of where all your political power comes, is the patricians. But then the plebeians are interesting, and they've got like some political protection, but they're not like super involved in it. Like they can't be leaders in the government. They have like a leader in the government that like works for them, which is interesting. But again, very much a stratified society, more so than we see in the United States today. But when we think about Rome, we think about things like the Colosseum, we think about gladiators, the famous aqueducts that they built to get fresh water to the cities, the Roman legions, and all this is like again fascinating stuff. Not stuff you need to know for the exam or anything like that, but because we're just giving you that real brief kind of review of a lot of stuff you've probably heard of or seen in TV and movies and stuff. And then probably the most famous person of the Roman era is Julius Caesar, who is going to be famously stabbed by some senators. And we're going to talk about why that happened here for the end of our video. So this isn't a slide you really need to take notes on. I just kind of like to emphasize, how many of our ideas for the American form of government are borrowed from ancient Rome. So elected leaders, you're going to notice Rome had two, where we just have one president, but a senate, and then a written code of law, a judicial system. And the big idea here is you're really dividing up power between all these different entities, and that kind of keeps any one person from becoming too powerful. The problem for Rome, and who knows, maybe eventually for the United States, is that one person eventually does become too powerful. We'll talk about why that happened. So with Rome, like I said, it's a republic, and the republic lasts for hundreds of years. And during the Republic, Rome keeps expanding and expanding and expanding, taking more and more territory. Well, to do that, you're going to need a powerful military. And whereas like soldiers in the American military today are paid by the government, are paid by taxpayers, soldiers during the Roman time period are paid by the generals. Well, the generals only make money basically by conquering territory and pillaging it. So there's kind of this constant incentive to keep expanding. Otherwise, the soldiers aren't going to get paid. Um, And it also leads to a situation where the soldiers are not loyal to Rome, the soldiers are loyal to their general. And so this most famously happens with a general named Julius Caesar. He was kind of the ruler of Rome's territory in what is today France. Back then it's called the Gaul. And stuff you don't need to know, but just kind of an idea of you know, those soldiers became more loyal to Caesar and less loyal to the Roman Republic. You know, most of the soldiers had never even been to Rome. And so there's a famous expression that people use, called crossing the Rubicon, which is where you kind of made a decision and there's kind of no turning back from that. The die is cast is another phrase that's going to come from Caesar. And so, again, not taking notes, you guys just kind of emphasizing. So there was a law that said you could never have basically a Roman army in the city of Rome because, senators were worried that then the military would take over, which is a good thing to be worried about because it's exactly what happens. Caesar's going to lead his soldiers across the Rubicon River, goes into Rome, and takes over. Um, Eventually, a bunch of senators are going to stab Julius Caesar, and that's kind of been immortalized in Shakespeare and stuff. The idea of the senators killing Julius Caesar was they thought it would restore the republic, but kind of once Caesar set the precedent of a general taking over, and he had a lot of success, at this point you're just going to see a series of emperors take over. And Rome is going to keep expanding. The problem is Rome expands so much that it kind of becomes too big to rule, despite a lot of the impressive things that they did. Now, one element we don't want to forget is within the Roman Empire and the Roman Republic is how stratified the system was, and in particular, the issue of slavery. So, a lot of those impressive monuments and things, built with slave labor. You can see you're talking almost half the population, between a third and a half of the population, is slaves during this time. And most people, even if you're just a small shopkeeper, own slaves. And a lot of these slaves, like I said, are prisoners of war um, or children that are kind of kidnapped. So there's like this incentive to kidnap kids. There's an incentive to keep fighting wars and all that. But one thing with it being that way, unlike we're going to see in the early United States, it's not based on like race or ethnicity or where people are from. It's really just about, people are being conquered. Christianity is going to be coming into play here as a major world religion, and it's part of kind of the Roman system. So Christianity initially didn't really see an issue with slavery, which is opposite kind of Judaism, which kind of has its origins in slavery. Um, but a huge part of the Roman economy is these are basically plantation farms, latifundia. Not something you need to know, but again, kind of just a funky term that I like to include. Um, Famous term you're going to see is Pax Romana. Pax Romana is a Latin phrase for Roman peace. It's Latin because that was the language of Rome, and across the regions of Europe, a lot of them have a Latin base. So they always say if you learn Latin, you can learn a lot of other languages really quick because it kind of set the base for a lot. So an important part about Rome is that it's going to unify Europe in a way that it had previously never been. Ancient Greece had never ruled anything like this. The ancient Egyptians had never ruled anything like this. So we see, quite a bit of unity. The problem is that that's a really big, really diverse territory to try and rule with a centralized government, which is what Rome is trying to do. And eventually it doesn't work. And the empire is going to collapse. The good news is that all the peace that Rome had kind of brought for 200 years, and all the trade networks and the roads they built and all the connections, when the Roman Empire collapses, parts of the Roman Empire are really going to go backwards, but parts of it are going to basically be able to hold on to all that information and to keep going. So when the Roman Empire goes away, kind of a lot of the knowledge within Europe is lost. Fortunately, a bunch of Muslim scholars have been able to get and retain it and keep it. And kind of that's going to set off the golden age of Islam in a couple of centuries, but it's also going to uh, eventually kind of bring when what they say is going to be able to trigger the Renaissance. Now that's several centuries in the future here. Islam's not even going to be a religion until for a couple hundred more years here. Um, but you can kind of see the Muslim world that was part of the Roman world. Now, Pax Romana is from 27 BCE, sometimes called BC or before Christ, to 180 CE or 80, which is the year of our Lord. So you can kind of figure out that this is the same time period that a guy named Jesus is going to come onto the scene, who is the founder of Christianity. And so while it's overall a time of peace, there's definitely internal strife and internal division within this Roman Empire. Um, One big part of Rome's history is their role in Christianity. Um, so for the first couple hundred years of Christianity, the Roman Empire, who still believes in gods and the mythology and the gods of like Mars and that kind of stuff, and Venus, um, really didn't like the idea of Christianity. Didn't like the idea of monotheism. And at this time, the emperors are viewed as sons of God. And so the idea of Jesus of Nazareth saying, he is the Son of God, that's a threat to the Roman emperor. And so that's kind of a big part of the reason why the Romans are going to be the ones that execute Jesus of Nazareth or Jesus Christ. And really, for the first several hundred years, Christians are really going to be persecuted by the Romans. And so, kind of famously, they'd have to kind of meet in secret. And a symbol we see a lot around a lot of Christian parts of the world today is this is the fish, sometimes called the Jesus fish, and it was originally kind of a secret symbol so that Christians would know where to meet without the Romans finding out. Over time, it grows from being that sect of Judaism. Jesus of Nazareth was born into a Jewish family, and it grows into a bigger and bigger religion. Where this really becomes important is around 300 CE or 80, so about 300 years after Jesus was executed. This Roman Empire is going to first say he's going to tolerate Christianity, and then he is going to convert to Christianity, which triggers the Roman world Christianity becoming the most popular religion there. And eventually, it's going to be Europe that's going to kind of spread Christianity around the world that we see today. Separate from Christianity, in some ways, the Roman Empire just gets really, really big, and there's just too much internal strife. It's going to end up splitting in half. And so you're going to get the Western Roman Empire, which is kind of this bluish here, and the Eastern or the Byzantine Empire in the east. The Western Roman Empire is going to break apart pretty quickly after this division. The Byzantine Empire is going to have about another 500-600 years to go. You can kind of see that here with this, all the different kingdoms of the former Western Roman Empire. So why this is important is, for 500 years, Rome had unified Europe, and then the Roman Empire collapses and goes away, and we have all these small kingdoms. So something needs to kind of fill that power vacuum and kind of keep Europe somewhat unified. And what's going to fill it is going to be the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church became really powerful or really popular in the Western Roman Empire, not so much in the Eastern or Byzantine. So when we think about the map of Christianity, a lot of times you'll hear like Eastern Orthodox Christians. Those would be people that were part of like that Byzantine Empire area. Roman Catholics and eventually Protestants kind of form out of what was the Western Roman Empire or Western Europe, with the Roman Catholics not being shockingly being established and important in the city of Rome. So they kind of are going to replace and kind of become the main political power. So while as we think of the Catholic Church as a very religious institution today, for a very long time, they were kind of very, very political and influencing who was the kings and influencing wars and all that kind of stuff. That's going to be kind of what we're going to see as we go into topic 1.4 with the Dark Ages of Europe, which weren't really all that dark. All right, guys, thank you.